my name is Alaa. I am a Yemeni-American filmmaker, and my film is called SELAHY. It's a short film, meaning my weapon. And it's a short film that talks about a young deaf girl who embarks in a war zone in the perspective of a deaf girl who just loves filmmaking. And the main reason who introduced her filmmaking and camera is her brother, her older brother, who is busy preoccupying the war zone because he's a journalist. So one day she asked him that she wants to go out, but she can't because her brother is busy. So she ends up walking on her own. And making matter worse, she will go out during an airstrike, which prevents her from being able to hear the airstrike.
Can you talk a bit about shooting in Yemen, what that was like, and where did you actually get to shoot? Because I know Yemen very much is in a bit of a hot spot right now.
So I actually shot this film in Jordan because shooting in Yemen will be very risky and impossible to do it right now. So I was very fortunate that I was able to shoot it just right before COVID locked everything down. And it was challenging to go through the whole, even if I did it in Jordan because it's international filmmaking, and I did my film for my undergrad thesis. So it was very hard to do that, challenging.
As far as finding a crew, what was that process like for you? Did you use a predominant Jordanian crew?
Finding a crew was one of the main things that I really, really needed to find the right crew to work with me for this because, I come from a different background. And finding a crew from US was a little challenge because I needed to find people who will kind of relate to the story or understand my vision. So I was fortunate that I was able to find crew in Jordan who are not only Jordanian but also Palestinian. So they kind of understood my story. They related to me. They were like, "We want to work with you and we want to help you on that." And that was it was a challenge. Although the funny thing, it was actually the film was supposed to originally film in Lebanon. And everything was ready, 90% ready and everything. But as you know, what happened in Lebanon, the revolution, so we had to cancel everything and change the whole thing, the whole plan in 2 weeks and finding a new crew, finding a whole different from scratch. And I was lucky that I was able to do that in Jordan. And here we are.
Can you talk a bit about those two actors in particular, where you found them? And they're incredible. I was blown away by the performance. I don't want to give too much away about the story, but there's a point where she goes through a struggle of losing the most important thing to her, and that was horrifying to watch. Can you talk a bit about finding them, but also how great those two actors are?
Well, first of all, thank you for the comment. It was hard, especially for the main lead, because the main lead, she's an actual deaf who was born to a deaf character, deaf family, And I only found her, I remember that I found her on a week or 2 weeks before the shooting. So it was frustrating because, it's very hard to find deaf actors. We're not having them. So I was really determined to have deaf actors no matter what. Everything was ready except the main lead. It was crazy, and I was I have to have her. And luckily, in the same day when she came in for the audition, the brother actor, he didn't know any sign language. And I was so upset that I was there were no actors who would be willing to take that. The performance of acting and having a deaf actor, sister, So he found her on the same day we were auditioning for all of them, and he saw the interpreter and he was like, "Teach me right now. How can I do this?" And when I saw that and him, I saw the determination and the willingness that he's going to learn to be in that perspective of having a deaf sister. And that's for the brother. But for my main actress, it was just one day, one shoot, and I only had two. But she spoke to me somehow. She was so shy. She'd never been in front of camera. She'd never been on a film set. She doesn't speak anything, but she reminded me of myself. when I was a little girl. So I felt like she's the right person. So it just, my gut, my heart was speaking to her. So I was like, I'm gonna have her. So I met with her, and it was hard working with her at first because a deaf child, a child actor, but also a disabled actor. And I'm like, okay, now I started to see how hard it is. So to gain her trust, I took off my hearing aids, and I was like, I'm like you. So trust me, I can tell you whatever you want to do, and don't be afraid of being on camera, or, when I tell you do it. Trust me, I'm not here to hurt you or whatever it is, because she was looking at everybody on the crew, mostly were men. So that was hard, but luckily she trusted me. She gained the relationship with me because I didn't know how to sign language. So I have my interpreter, who I'm so grateful for having him with me, which is funny because he was also the person I had to direct him in order to direct the deaf actress on my film. So it was 3 different languages actually of speaking, because a lot of the crew, they don't speak English. They only speak Arabic. And I speak Arabic, but I'm a Yemeni dialect as opposed to Jordanian dialect. So it was interesting. So we had to go through the whole process of translating, experimenting with the whole thing, and I had to play some games with her instead of telling her the story. She never read the script. She never saw the book, so she didn't probably know the story, what's going on. We just told her that this is what you're gonna do this day. Just trust me. I need you to feel upset that day. For example, when the bombing happened, this is something that I would like. Okay, have you ever felt this pain? It was just a whole different type of directing her as opposed to their brother.
Wow, that's wild.
Thank you.
How cathartic has this experience been for yourself, knowing, like you said, that there is such you on the screen, even though I know that's not your story, but knowing the history of Yemen, the history of the Middle East, it still very much is your story. What was this experience like for you personally?
It was a very, very interesting experience because it was a discovery of myself. I grew up as a hard of hearing, but I grew up predominantly to function in the hearing world. So I never learned sign language or was introduced to the deaf community. They were not included back the days where I grew up. And so I would never even thought of myself as a hard of hearing. So I would just grow up as a speaking person. I speak 2 languages, Arabic and English. So I never spoke sign language. So watching that experience, and when I wrote the script, I was sharing the experience of me, the sound that I hear or I don't hear when I wrote that on script, made me realize who I am as an artist, as a filmmaker, made me find my voice as a filmmaker. And it was a discovery experience for me, and I think it made me find my goal as a filmmaker of what are the stories that I want to tell.
You've shared what your translation of your title is for the film, but can you explain My Weapon to those that may not get what you're talking about?
So thank you for asking that question. My Weapon is a very important title that I called it in this film because for me, as a hard of hearing, when I was in the war, sometimes I would turn off my hearing aid to not hear the bombs. But it was risky to do that. So I would have to turn them on so I can be able to save myself if anything happened. What's going on around me, I have to turn on. So it was like my weapon. My hearing aid is my weapon to me. But at the same time, the camera is also my weapon because I grew up documenting things around me. It was like my source of escapism. It was the language, the introduction, the communication to the world to me. So my camera was my weapon too. And it's the same thing that goes to the film. My weapon is not only about the deaf girl, but it's also the brother who is a journalist. His weapon of making money is weapon for speaking up for the voiceless people. So it resembles so many different things that it just came to me. I was like, this is what it needs to be called, is a weapon.
The second weapon, the camera. In real life in the Middle East, that weapon has become hugely influential right now today. Social media has been the outlet for entire movements. I mean, we've seen the whole Middle Eastern, Egypt, the whole element on that side of the world open people's eyes. Me and Dev are Israeli, and we've now had to look at everything from a different perspective, just from the voices that have been out there. What does it mean to you to be a part of that group of people that are giving a voice to those that may not have had a voice 10 years ago even, and how important that voice is in showing all sides of the arguments that are out there? Because it doesn't, these struggles, not just in Yemen but throughout the Middle East, they've been with us thousands of years, and yet for the first time we're getting all the perspectives. Do you feel that that is what could lead to some form of change in those areas?
I do think that's important, because it's not important to me. It's important to the audience, to the people who are seeing it. Because, you know, we have voices. Sometimes we're being shut down, our voices. But now that we have camera, it's our voices. Just like me, I'm a Muslim woman, hard of hearing. I have stories that I want to share, but my movie will speak for me. My stories will speak for me. That's my camera when I record things. And the audience is what matters. The people who will see the story, the different people who have never heard the stories of what's going on, the social justice, not only what happened in the Middle East about the Black Lives Matter and the indigenous people, the Native American, all these people are now using the only powerful tool in their camera. And it's really not just the camera, it's on the cell phone. That's what happened with the George Floyd. It was a cell phone camera. So that is like the real weapon, which is also goes back to the question why I called it my weapon, because my weapon could be dangerous and it could be not dangerous, because the camera is dangerous now in the war zones that you see. And it's dangerous for my character, if you think about it, because it was dangerous for her to go out and film. If she didn't love the camera, she wouldn't go out and film. She would just stay home and be safe. But she took something that is dangerous. She went out, she filmed, her weapon, her other weapon distracted her, was not able to hear. So she had, it could be positive and negative, but they're all very, very powerful tool and very powerful message that can be taught. So it's important for people to see it.
You know you must be a role model. What does that mean to you?
You know, I think it means to me a lot, because I grew up myself not seeing role models like me. So I've always watched most white shows, white perspective ideas, westernizing. So I was not able to see characters like me. I was not able to see how the people in the deaf community. So I think it's a lot of pressure, I'm not gonna lie, to be a role model. But someone needs to step up and do something about it in order for the next generation to be able to do something, not be afraid of who they are or share their voices.
Bentonville showcases women filmmakers. They showcase women of color, women of different religion, but also this year in particular, your film, Coda, film about dealing with deafness. How important was it to make it into Bentonville, and what does it mean to you to be here at the festival?
I think it really, it means a lot, to be honest, because this is my first festival ever for me, personally, for my first film. So it means a lot, because it means a lot to the people of disability, to people of how to feel. It means to them more than to me. It means to their voices. So I'm very grateful for this film festival, for having the diversity and for having the different cultures, not only just women, people with disability. So it's very important.
As you said, this was a film from school. Is the hopes to make this into a feature one day? And if not that, do you know what your next project is?
I think I'm a person who just, whenever wants to find something, I need to get it. That's what I did with my film. But with the industry, with the reality, with what's going on with Hollywood, with the funding, we have to really sometimes step down and be like, okay, maybe another project I have to go for. But for me, I do want to make a feature film out of it. Knowing the difficulty of funding it will be challenging. So who knows, maybe next year, maybe 20 years from now. I don't know when, but it got to happen. Not for me. So I do think my next project, I want to turn that into a future. And the same project, not the same, I would say related to it. When going back to the same question you asked me about how did I find about myself, is that so I am planning someday that I want to visit Yemen, even though with the war is going on, because I can't wait. You never know what happened. So my plan is that when I want to go there is I want to make a documentary, finding my voice and finding stories of how my life was in Yemen at the hard of hearing, and why I was not introduced to the deaf community, why there wasn't deaf communities in my world. And also I want to find, it's kind of like I want to find the answers of what my mother did for me. Because I lost my mother when I was like 14 or 15 years old. So she was the source of education for me. She's the one who taught me everything. So when you're young, you're not really realizing a lot of things. But now that I'm growing up, dating this movie, I had so many questions that I was like, why did I do that? The question that I would wish if I asked my mom right now. So I think this is my next project that I want to find out my answer by interviewing people who will connect with the doctors. What did they thought of me when I came to this world? What is going on? What was happening? What did my mom do? Why did she did what she did? So I think this is my two different projects that it's all connected.
You mentioned earlier something I thought was very important. Working with the Jordanians, the Arabic dialect was different. Can you explain to those that don't realize the diversity of the Arab world itself? From Yemen to Jordan to Lebanon, you're talking three completely different places, people, languages, food. I think everyone on the Western side that isn't familiar with it or connected in some way views that as just all Arab. And that's not the reality.
So it's funny you ask this question because I was challenged before actually making this film to Jordan or Lebanon is to do it here. And I was like, I couldn't do it. My gut was like, no. I would do it here if people would allow me to have the freedom to tell the story that I need to tell with the authenticity of the production design, cinematography, language. It's hard to get all these things with the lack of what we have in this country, and the industry mainly. So I was like, okay, I've got to do it internationally. I've got to have different diversity. And I still have to include different people in my film. Like, my producer is an African American. People were like, why African American? Why not Arab producer? I was like, listen, we have to include diversity. It still matters. We still have to include people who understand the struggle that we go through. So it's important that for the industry to see that we're not just capable, but it's also, are you able to work with us at the point that we can work with you or welcome us into your world, but we want to welcome you to our world too. So it's very important to show that.
That's such a big statement. Wow. That's a whole nother weapon you've just unleashed. Why is diversity important to the film industry?
Diversity is important for the film industry because it's time for change. It's really time for change. We have been seeing films over and over and over with the same white perspective. Just like I said, when you asked me what are my inspiration of the films, and I'm like, okay, the real inspiration is because I wasn't really seeing film like me or different. So I think it's important for them because it's not only going to help us, it's going to help them too, to include different type of stories. We need to hear different struggles, different identity, different culture, food. There are so many things that is really missing out that is important to be on screen.
With that being said, knowing your audiences are going to be people who don't know that, what does it mean to you to see the reaction of people, or that you anticipate to see the eye-opening? Is that's got to be one of the reasons why you're making this film, is to open people's eyes to this struggle?
Can you repeat that question again? I'm sorry. I'm trying to follow up with it.
Knowing your audiences may not know the struggle, how important is it to go to those audiences, to not just show Arab Americans, but Americans as a whole, this story?
You know, knowing my audience was one of the things that I was taught, that were telling me, you've got to know your audience. And you've got to know what the message, who are the audience, who do you want to send this message to? And this is something that I very, very have difficulty time with, even until now. Because, you know, sometimes, even as an Arab and as a woman and as coming from a different background, sometimes we tend to westernize. And for me, I'm confused. So this is for me like, okay, I can't know who my audience are, because we're still in a world that is so many different diversities, so many different stories. So I think for me is that the audience can come, whoever wants to come to see the film. Whoever are interested, they are my audience. The one who supported, they are my audiences. No matter what color you are, no matter what gender you are, I don't know, and I don't care. But what I care is that, do you get my story? Do you get what I'm trying to speak? Are you listening to me? If you're listening to me, I want to listen to you too. So thank you for listening. Thank you for enjoying. And let's be, group. Let's grow up together. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to grow.
I listened. I loved it. Thank you for making it. Thank you for telling this story. And thank you for bringing it to Bentonville and talking to us about it, because I do think your film, your experience are things people need to see. And your idea of the notion of a changing industry should be the forefront of all of filmmaking. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for asking me all this questions.